Welcome back once again to the All 32 Pod. Mike Giardi, Will Parkinson with you. Excited to be here as always. Big week of football last week, a big one coming. We're in it now. I mean, we're definitely in it. You're starting to get that pattern. Like, okay, practice, play. You're getting into that mode now where it's you feel football season is here, and we're this close to regular season games.
Yeah, I'm excited to hop in. This episode's going to be loaded, jam-packed, full of some of the holdouts we've touched on in the past that have heightened some big-time injury news. So some rookie quarterback debuts, and obviously we're going to get into the AFC South, an extremely exciting division that in years past might have been overlooked a little bit. But we have plenty to talk about with that division, Mike.
No question. And as always, this show is brought to you by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network, and Game Time. Best tickets, best prices to get you in to see any event that you want to see. And look, at this time of year, whether preseason games, regular season games, we got baseball heating up, getting closer to the playoffs. And, before we know it, it's going to be hockey season and the NBA as well. So, we're definitely we're chock full right now, and Game Time can certainly help you out in that regard. Let's start where as you mentioned, rookie quarterbacks, and obviously the wide variety of approaches to each one of these guys, but what it looked like their first time out there. And why don't we just start with the first pick, Caleb Williams? Didn't play a ton.
Yep.
He looks good. And if you're watching the Hard Knocks now that's in season, in the preseason with the Bears, they're tailoring everything to him. It's exactly the way you should go about your business with a potential franchise quarterback you pick number one.
Yeah, look, I don't want to, there's not too much to break down from Caleb. I think he did a lot of things we expect, right? I know the viral throw. Caleb, better than anybody or better than almost anybody we've seen in a long time, coming out of college, and the way some of the throws he made, very shortstop, second baseman-like throws with a rocket arm, and, made it one of those, Caleb Williams-like throws. I know we kind of Mahomes and Rodgers and these other guys, we kind of compare him to in a lot of ways, but Caleb compares himself to Rodgers, and a lot of people, obviously in our line of work, have compared him to Mahomes. I don't want to make too much of it. I think we will talk about in the NFC North episode. I think if the Bears can leave 2024 and Caleb Williams leave 2024 saying, wow, maybe he has a Stroud rookie year, maybe he doesn't, maybe he's good, not great, who knows, but he's off to a good start. I think Hard Knocks has reflected well. And I think getting out in the preseason, getting those feet wet a little bit, the Bears, again, had the 4 preseason games. So I think positive returns on where we're at with Caleb. And again, the expectations are really high.
Yeah.
But I think he'll be able to live up to a lot of those. The Bears haven't had, a 4,000-yard passer in franchise history. I think he'll be okay.
Yeah, ever. I mean, that franchise has been an absolute debacle when it comes to quarterbacks. Then Jayden Daniels in Washington, and look, he's in the same boat as Caleb Williams. This is your offense, dude. We're going to do what we can to prop you up because Williams is the number 1 pick. Daniels is the number 2 pick, obviously coming off a phenomenal year at LSU. And again, he looks the part. I'm always a little bit concerned about some of the running stuff and maybe exposing himself to hits as he did when he was at LSU. You do that here, it could be lights out for you, but he looks very comfortable in what they're trying to do right now. And it's a pretty good supporting cast.
Yeah, again, it's hard to make too much of it, right? I think he struggled a lot during joint practices with the Jets against the Jets ones. A lot, and that's natural. That's going to happen. I think that's a welcome to the NFL moment. That's one of the best defenses in the league, and bad weather, the whole 9 yards, and so he made 2 or 3 awesome plays. I thought in his debut, he had this beautiful throw down the sideline. Could not have thrown it any better. That's what he did well in college. Again, similar to what Caleb, Jaden's calling card, being able to run the ball, throwing these gorgeous deep balls, slot fade down the sideline. Those were both awesome. He also missed a couple, and, you'd love to have those back and things like that. Again, he was facing a mostly third-string Jets defense. So, again, don't want to make too much of it, but glad he was able to get in the end zone. Glad he's able to, collect on one of those big plays. And, now you take it from here. Again, Jayden Daniels is going to be in a situation where, just keep taking those steps forward, similar to Caleb. Lean on what you do really well. Have those be your calling cards, and then kind of some of the short and intermediate stuff, they'll be able to figure out as time. There's going to be some growing pains.
Yeah, for sure.
Both of those teams, different expectations. Washington specifically, I think, is definitely at least a year away, which should be competitive at least in year one. Dan Quinn will get those guys playing hard on the defensive side of the ball. So should put them in a decent situation to succeed.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Then we come to Foxboro, where Drake Maye got off to a nice a fast start, if you will, in the joint practice against the Eagles, but then it was a complete debacle thereafter. I mean, look, just in general, the Eagles outclassed the Patriots. I've already referenced this. There was a joint practice years ago between the Patriots and then they were the Redskins at the time in Richmond, Virginia. And it was the Brady Belichick, height of their powers. And the Patriots put on a clinic in front of Gruden, Griffin, that whole group. Kirk Cousins was there. I remember after the practice was over, in which the Patriots thoroughly dominated, Patriots offense was so dissatisfied with how they played. Again, they dominated, that they went on a separate field with just Brady and the ones, and they ran plays. And the guys were walking off for Washington being like, oh, so that's what it takes. Of course, Washington never got there, but that's what this was. Philly doesn't have the same resume as the Patriots did with Brady there, but obviously a very good team, a team that should be in the mix this year. And they thoroughly outclassed the Patriots. And, May, it's interesting because I think after the spring, I thought that he made good progress. And I thought to myself, he could make a run at this sometime this summer, Jacoby Brissett. And now I'm at the point where after the last 3 or 4 practices and the joint practice, where I think he's behind where they thought he would be. I think he is not ready for prime time. And I think they're telling you he's not ready for prime time. I don't know what they're going to do for reps. We're recording this on Wednesday. Patriots play Thursday against Philly. I get the sense I know he's going to play more than he did. He only got 6 official snaps in the first preseason game, but I'm not sure how much more because I don't know that they feel like he's necessarily in a good place with the offense, with all the stuff that they asked him to change. And that's, to me, the real root of this. I think they're trying to fix too much. I think they should have said, we're dealing with your footwork. And then, at some point we'll deal with what we think is a bit of a release problem on some of the shorter throws. I think they put so much in his head between that and learning a new offense and also trying to kind of rein him in, which yet another thing that doesn't make sense to me when you've got a good athlete who makes plays off schedule and likes to make plays. As he said, it's part of who he is. And they're trying to say, stay right there and just read it out. I don't know that this is a great start to the Drake Maye against 21. By no means am I saying this is a bust or anything like that. Who the hell would know? He's certainly got a ton of talent, but it's raw, and you're seeing that right now. And Elliot Wolf said to us back at draft time, or maybe right before the draft, can you support a rookie quarterback at number 3? And he's like, I don't know where this narrative is coming from. Like, yes, we can support that. We have enough around him to support it. Well, their offensive line has been so bad to this point, Will. Feels like they can't support it. So they're trying to do all these things with him mechanically, trying to learn a new offense. And then, oh, by the way, they can't protect. His last 4 dropbacks, there was a fumbled snap and 3 sacks. Like, Patriots quarterbacks, by depending on who your people, the stat trackers and these things, had as many as 15 sacks yesterday between he and Brissett.
Yeah, the one thing that
debacle.
comes to mind is Zach Wilson's rookie year, and I'm not saying he's going to be Zach Wilson at all. I'm just saying the Jets went to Green Bay Zach Wilson's rookie year, and obviously everyone remembers Carl Lawson tearing his Achilles after this big summer, but the Jets were obviously one of the worst teams in the league. They ended up picking 4th overall the next year. They won 4 games. The Jets went into Green Bay against, this is, peak Rodgers, second generation peak Rodgers. Yep. In 2021, he obviously went on to win the MVP again that year. They won 13 games. We know the whole story. They ended up losing to San Francisco in the playoffs. But the Jets went up there and it was like, oh, they look pretty spunky. Zach's had some moments, some growing pains. Let's see what it looks like. And it was awful. The Jets then go out on the field and Zach looked awesome in the preseason game. So I'm very curious to see game time comes in. A lot of Philly starters not playing. Some very bland coverages. What does Drake Maye build on that? JJ McCarthy's in an interesting situation. There's 2 big things here. Obviously, the news comes out yesterday. He's got the meniscus surgery coming up. We don't know if it's going to be a trim or a full repair. Obviously, that means either 4 to 6 weeks, similar again to what Zach Wilson experienced a couple years ago, or is it a full repair, which is obviously many months. We'll see on that. Obviously, a couple of things here. I thought Sam Darnold and McCarthy both played really well. Mm-hmm. I thought Sam Darnold made some throws that go, and this is why people were so high on him coming out of his rookie year. I thought JJ McCarthy played really well. I thought he made a lot of big time throws. He made some throws out to the left, which we all know is not his forte. I thought, the interception obviously was rough and whatever, but growing pains. I thought getting him the proper amount of reps in a game, and something that you talked a lot about with Drake Maye, and we talked a lot about in last episode, of like, this is what JJ McCarthy needed. He's a developmental quarterback. As much as he was this win now game manager type in college, he needs the reps. And as much as preseason I know is not real life, and the joint practices and practice is probably a better indication of who you are. I thought it was really good to see him out there. Now, it's extremely disappointing. I don't think he was going to start the year anyways. So I don't think if it's just a trim,
right,
I don't think it hurts him too much. That said, I do think of all the quarterbacks in this class, I wonder if that's the one situation where him getting hurt is the worst case scenario in terms of his rookie year, just because he's a guy, again, who needs reps. He would have played a lot in these last 2 preseason games, a lot in the joint practices, a lot of practice reps, et cetera. The regular season, practice is not the same if you're not a starter. You're basically just kind of irrelevant, during the season. You're getting mental reps more than anything. So, again, I feel for JJ McCarthy, because I feel like really strong start. He struggled early in camp. He started to build on it a lot. And, him and Darnold really both have looked pretty damn good from anyone you ask in Minnesota. So, yeah, that was just a shame yesterday to see that come out. And I really hope it's just a trim and not a tear, because I think, again, really high ceiling for McCarthy, whatever you think of him. But that was disappointing, obviously, to
Yeah, we're talking about 4 weeks for a trim versus an extensive period of time there. If it's a real repair, in fact, could cost them the entire season. So that would be a big issue for them. Michael Penix, on the other hand, and we shouldn't be surprised by this, right? Just kind of ready to go. And they're going to have some interesting conversations, I would imagine, in Atlanta as the season goes on, if Kirk Cousins doesn't live up to his end of the bargain. Because I don't know, maybe strictly from a amount of time played, the offense, the style that they ran, kind of maybe the most ready to go of any of the quarterbacks, just in terms of drop him in there and he can probably do this. Now, what his ceiling is, I don't know. I think he's got a high floor. The ceiling, it could be right where the floor is. He could be this, and that's really all it ends up being. But he's an interesting guy. It's obviously, we've talked about the idea that selection didn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people. They've tried to explain it away. I still don't quite understand the explanation why you would give Kirk all that money and then draft the kid at 8 when you're really paying Kirk to play for 2 years. Penix isn't a developmental project. He's sort of more of probably should start now. So that is an interesting one to me. And then, of course, there's Bo Nix, right? Who, much like McCarthy, dude, here's the ball. Go run out and go play. He didn't start last week. He's supposed to start week 2. He's going to get a ton of reps, and the job is there. It's between him and Stidham and not Zach Wilson. The job is there for him, and he looked pretty comfortable in week 1.
Yeah, I thought he made a lot of – he's a guy, again, who you expected to play well, right? And in the aspect of played a ton in college, as we know, a lot of starts, a lot of experience. This offense should be a lot of, as you mentioned last week when we did the AFC West, this timing, rhythm, kind of older Drew Brees type, where get the ball out, shorter depth of target, got to get the ball in the playmaker's hands. Thought he looked good, and honestly, it feels like Caleb's going to start, Jane Daniels is going to start. I feel like he's the third that ends up starting. I feel like early on in the year, obviously, I think Brissett and Darnold will win those jobs, and Kirk Cousins, obviously in different varying situations, injuries, not. I do think Nix is, again, I think you kind of know what Stidham is, and I think he's a quality backup and a guy that could spot start for you if needed. But I think the Broncos invested the 12th overall pick knowing they needed so much other help on the roster. They still went with the quarterback there, and it just feels like he's adequate. He's acquainted himself nicely with in his first game. Again, he's got to build on it. He's going to start week 2 or week 3, I guess, technically the preseason. But I think he's on the inside track now to win that job, and I think he should. I think, again, we talked about it last week. Can the Broncos leave going, we have our quarterback, if we build enough around him? Can he be our Jimmy G on the Niners, and we build the whole rest of the roster up and we're good enough to go try to compete? We'll see. But, he obviously had a nice start, to his NFL preseason career. Yeah,
and as we talked about, that roster is a little wonky at this point. Let's move on. We mentioned the big injury. That's the McCarthy one, and we'll see how that all shakes out. But let's get down to the off the field stuff that continues to happen here. And I want to start with you, because the big news this week is the disconnect between the Jets and Hassan Reddick, who remains holding out. And it sounds like, I don't know, it doesn't feel like this thing's ending anytime soon.
Yeah, look, there's a bunch. We unpacked it on that first episode in terms of kind of where both sides are coming from. Again, the Jets wanted to see Reddick go out and prove it. You know, he was not their asset. They traded for him. That sounds like, by all accounts, they made some type of offer before the trade. It was a low offer based on any reporting done from the Reddick side, and from the Jets side, they felt like it was, first offer. Obviously, nothing was done. He told the Jets he'd report. He obviously has not. We're on day 22 of the holdout as we're recording this, and it'll go to day 23 for sure. And he's lost to just, there's a lot there. And, I think the biggest thing with Reddick is, again, it's gotten ugly now. This trade request was very much the last ditch of, hey, I want to try to get some leverage back here, some type of way to force the Jets' hand a bit. The Jets fan base has seemingly reacted the opposite way and just kind of dumping all over Reddick, which is what I kind of understand. And, Zach Rosenblatt of The Athletic mentioned it, I believe, Wednesday of last week. Hey, Reddick's putting a lot of pressure on himself to come out and perform right away. The fan base will get on him quickly. Rodgers said he's going to reach out to Reddick. They've spoken, I guess, at some level, but he said he's going to try to get him involved and get him here. Robert Saleh and Ulbrich and have said all the right things. It's just gotten very ugly, and there's a lot of other things, and we'll get to a couple of the other holdouts and hold-ins again that continue to fester themselves. This one's just brutal because, like, the Jets are not going to be able to shake that lol Jets narrative until they win games. Yep. And the Jets and Reddick's side of things, like, he wants to get paid, but also he's not adequate. He's not really looking great in this situation either. I think it's not ideal for a player that hasn't, I don't know. It's just, it's a rough look. So again, it should get done. I would assume soon. There's a lot of pressure, but at the same time, if you're Reddick, like, why not push this thing as far as you possibly can? You've already dug yourself in with millions in fines. The fan base already is, turning against you. The last thing I'll say on this is this narrative: the Jets don't need Hassan Reddick. And this dates fully back to the Bryce Huff situation. They didn't either trade him, extend him multiple different times. They lose him. They trade John Franklin Myers. It turned into a disaster. He got new leverage. I don't know if Reddick's asking for more than any team would ever, any team would have any interest in offering him. But the Jets need him. He is a guy that takes them from a playoff team to if he plays anything like 2022, we're probably going to the title. Like, that's how good he was in 2022. And honestly, the last 4 years, and this Jets defense is very good. Very, very good. I still think it's a top 5 unit or top 6 unit without Reddick. It could be the best unit in the league if Reddick's firing on all cylinders. So they got to get this done and done soon, because it's not only a bad look right now on both sides, but the Jets have a lot of extensions that are coming up in the next 24 months. Yeah. Sauce, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Michael Carter, Tyler Conklin. There's a lot. Elijah Vera Tucker. There's a lot there. This young core setting a precedent the way they're at now is just, it's not a great look. And I'd like to see that get cleaned up, because otherwise all reports have been great out of Jets camp. This is the one dark cloud hanging over them.
Well, and as we've seen now too, guys are willing, and you mentioned the young core and having to deal with those guys sooner rather than later. We're seeing now a lot of the young core guys around the league are drawing a line in the sand a year earlier than they normally would. Ja'Marr Chase being the latest, right? Ja'Marr Chase is, he didn't show up for camp the other day. Again, we're recording this on Wednesday. Zach Taylor continues to say this is a day-to-day thing, and we have a plan. I think the plan is clear. Ja'Marr Chase wants to get paid, and until he gets paid, he's not going out in the field, which is his right to do, even though I know he signed the contract, but there's about $100 million at play.
I'd say he's earned his
it's and definitely and look, the Justin Jefferson with the $87 million guaranteed, I think, has sort of set the bar for CeeDee Lamb, and we've had the odd back and forth between Jerry Jones and Lamb about we don't have any urgency, and then we do, we really want Amir, we need him, that whole thing. But Lamb is saying the same thing. Well, show me the Justin Jefferson money. Like, that's what Ja'Marr is saying. Show me the Justin Jefferson money, and it's all good. I'll be right there. I'll sign it. I'll be out in the practice field that afternoon. Until that gets done, though, you're in this holding pattern in both teams. Obviously, you're talking about Dallas. If they don't have CeeDee Lamb, I know they're pumping up some receivers in training camp right now, but CeeDee Lamb changes their offense. Ditto for Ja'Marr Chase. As good as T. Higgins is not Ja'Marr Chase. Very few guys are Ja'Marr Chase. So both those teams kind of in a holding pattern with that. We might as well stay with Brandon Ayuk And now, the reporting on that thing has gone back and forth too, right? And we've had, you have the Ayuk kind of shouting out at Tom Pelissero for a report that the Niners are re-engaging, and they're in the media every day, and the Niners are certainly in the media every day. They do a very good job of getting their point across with the various outlets. Now reports are maybe they're close to a deal, but the Steelers are still waiting. The Steelers still think they have a chance here. I still feel like all along, Ayuk, he wants the money, but I think he realizes San Francisco is the best place to be.
Yeah,
Pittsburgh has questions about quarterback, has questions across the roster. San Francisco is built to win now. You win a Super Bowl and you get your money, then you set yourself up for a potential Hall of Fame type career.
Yeah, it just the Ayuk thing, look, I think it's either he's a Niner or he's going to end up with the Steelers. I think that's pretty much solidified now. Those are the two teams. Again, I think he makes the Steelers better. I don't think that the Steelers are by any means a full-on contender unless Justin Fields or Russell Wilson turn into the guys they were either drafted or looked like 10 years ago.
Right.
I think it does change the Niners. I think it hurts the Niners more than it helps the Steelers, in the present term. Again, the Steelers in 12 months, if they go and get, some elite quarterback and that's on the market and they become that team, maybe it's a different conversation. The Ayuk thing is a bit weird, only from the San Francisco point of view of whether you look at some of the rumored deals. Is it a 2 and a 4 and a 5? Is it a 2 and a 5 and Amari Cooper? Is it a 2 and a 5 in Judon? Is it a 2 and a 4 from the Steelers? Whatever it is, right? Like the million different ways you could look at it. It just feels like now the Niners picking up draft capital for 25. Like if they were going to move him, it almost feels like if you're a Niners fan, like damn, why couldn't we have moved him?
Yes.
Right before the draft. And the one other, kind of thing with Ayuk's to be interesting is what the money ends up looking like. It seems like the Patriots offered upwards of $32 million a year in average annual value. It seems like the Niners were in the $25 or $26 million range, if you believe the reporting there. You've seen some stuff the Steelers might be in more that $28, $29 million range. So honestly, nowhere close to where the Patriots were. You just wonder, is that $2 million or $3 million enough to say, hey, I want to go to Pittsburgh? We'll see. If it gets done, I'm sure now it'll get done in 20 minutes and we'll have to re-record a pod. But the Ayuk thing, and again, no update on Trent Williams, no update on CeeDee Lamb. Jamar Chase is out. Tyreek Hill was 15 minutes late for practice yesterday. Not sure why that wasn't covered more in depth. I'm not sure what happened there. But yeah, it's been a crazy 2 days now of, Judon's back at practice, but still wants out of New England badly or wants a new deal. He's very active on social media. So not only are these players and teams very active in terms of the reporting, they're both very active in getting their side of the story out here. It's been kind of a wild week of holdouts and hold-ins, over, just a 36-hour, 48-hour period.
Yeah, before we turn the page to the AFC South, you mentioned Judon, and he was a beast on the practice field in the joint practices against the Eagles. And it's sort of been a roller coaster with him because obviously you had the event a couple of weeks ago where, he makes a public spectacle of it all. Is not at practice the next day. We've talked to him since one time, and it's, he's still in that same place. Like, I said I'd play for this contract, even though I don't want to, but I didn't say anything about practice. Well, now all of a sudden he's been practicing, and he's practicing hard and practicing well. The first time this happened, I thought, oh, maybe they're getting, and then I was told, no, they're not getting close. It's the same thing. And I just come back to this is the thing I can't get past. Elliott Wolf has been essentially in charge since January. You've had 7+ months to figure this out, and you haven't figured it out. And you haven't figured it out because you're not close. So what are you doing? Why? Either get there or get something close that he finally bends and says, yeah, that's acceptable to me, or get out. Make the trade. They've talked about it, that they don't know how many wins they're going to have this year. There's been some references already to 2025, like in not even like intentional, like start talking and then next year slips into the conversation. Then it's like, let me reel that back in. I didn't mean to say that, but you do mean to say that because it's going to take a little while. And you mentioned it on the last pod. The timelines don't match. When you hope to be good again, he's going to be 33 years old, 34 years old, whatever it is. It makes no sense to commit to that. So I still think they're going to get, at some point, they're going to just wise up and they're going to move on.
Yeah.
And maybe that's another situation where you wait for someone to have an injury, or somebody who, I mentioned Chicago last time, and Booker, actually, their rookie, has gotten off to a nice start, but like they look at it and say, we're ready. We can be a playoff team. We just don't have that other guy. Go get that other guy. But I would imagine with the same thing, he's still going to want his money, at least for this year. Like, I'm not paying for 6.5, so you're going to have to figure that out too before the deal gets finalized.
Yeah, one guy who did get paid, Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah of the Browns, hybrid linebacker, safety. The Browns now, Brad Spielberger, formerly of PFF, obviously one of the biggest geniuses working with G's players making at least $10 million a year, which is tied with the Eagles for the most, or breaking their tie. Sorry, they have now the most in the NFL. 3 years, $39 million, about $25 million guaranteed. So, obviously an added 2 years there in addition to this year. Great player. Part of what it was one of, if not the best defenses in the league last year. I would say probably their second or third best player on that defense, him and Denzel Ward. So loved him coming out. I know there were some questions around kind of position flexibility and what he's going to do and some kind of health related stuff, but he's able to stay healthy. He's been a dynamite player in the NFL, and it's nice to see the Browns doing something that, again, we've mentioned with the Jets and these other different teams you'd like to see them do, is paying their young guys ahead of time, getting some of these deals done. Even looking back at the Myles Garrett deal, like that almost seems cheap at this point. Yeah. Similar to what Kansas City did with Mahomes, and I know they're all different spots, but that to me looked like the way to get. The Browns have handed out some interesting contracts, obviously, mainly their quarterback, but this is one of those no-brainers. JOK is a main stalwart of your defense. It's a well-valued deal, and I think that's the path forward for. We finally got one deal done. Now let's see what happens with some of these other ones.
I did his pro day. Just a quick story. I did his pro day at Notre Dame, and Frank Reich was there. I think Frank was still in Indianapolis. Whatever. Mike Tom. There were several head coaches, but after he did some pass covering drills, because again, trying to show that flexibility, like is he a safety? Is he a linebacker? He ran over and shook Tomlin's hand, and I asked him in the interview. I said, "Hey, what'd you say to Tomlin?" And he goes, "Come get me." That's what I told him. Pittsburgh didn't come get him. Cleveland did. Cleveland's pretty happy about it. As you mentioned, they paid him. All right, we're going to take a quick break so we can pay the bills. We're going to come back and preview the AFC South.
Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, you just go against the numbers. You against the numbers, that's it. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks. With as little as 4 correct picks, you can turn $10 into $1,000. That's right, $10 into $1,000. It's that easy. One Caleb Williams passing yard gets you one win on Prize Picks every week in September. That's right. Only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football season in September. 4 weeks of free wins, 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss the deal on Prize Picks because it's gone when September is gone, when September ends. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long with Prize Picks. Patrick Mahomes, what do you think of this one? Patrick Mahomes for more than 4,300 passing yards. And Aaron Rodgers, listen, he has to really step it up. Aaron Rodgers for more than 3,750 passing yards. Yeah, I think both of those can happen. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, run your game.
All right, time to take a look at the AFC South, which kind of was a bloodbath last year. Like, if you look, everybody was tightly bunched together. The Titans ended up, the bottom fell out for them, but for a while there, they were in the mix as well. Just 4 games between the 4 teams. And it's interesting because I think the team that was most active in the offseason is the team that you and I think are definitively the last place team in this division. And that's the Tennessee Titans, 6-11 last year. And then, of course, a major overhaul. They fire Mike Vrabel after, like, within 6 weeks or 2 months of saying, the owner saying, no, we want him here for the long term. They fire him. There was some talk that when he went to see the Patriots, as he was inducted into the Patriot Hall of Fame, some conversations that happened there bothered Amy Strunk, the owner. There's other conversations about just sort of how the back part of the season went and how willful and strong a personality Vrabel is that she said, we can't do this. So she decided to fire Vrabel, picked Rand Carthon, the GM. Carthon hired Brian Callahan to be their new head coach. Callahan, of course, the offensive coordinator in Cincinnati, and did a great job there. However, didn't call the plays. Zach Taylor, the head coach, called all the plays. Callahan now coming to Tennessee and said he will call the plays, and the maybe the best part of this entire transaction, and I think Brian's a good young coach, but we'll see with this roster, is that he got to bring his dad, Bill Callahan, along, left Cleveland, joined his son in Tennessee, and we know, as good a line coach as there ever was, ever is, has been, whatever. But they're a team that just, and think about what they did in the offseason, Will. Ton of money on Calvin Ridley out of nowhere. They was supposedly the Patriots and the Jags, and they come in and blow everybody out of the water. It's essentially a 2-year deal but $50 million guaranteed. Then they can do whatever they want after that. L'Jarius Sneed, they make the deal there, pay him a ton of money. Sign Tyler Boyd, who's on the back end, but as their slot guy. They are obviously already brought in DeAndre Hopkins last year, paid him big money. Signed Lloyd Cushenberry to a big contract. Like, they've thrown a ton of money at their problems, except I don't know that it's enough to move them off the 6-11 total that they were last year.
Yeah, like the Titans are a weird one, because if you the defense, big time names, right? You see, obviously Jeffrey Simmons, who's franchise stalwart, awesome, awesome player. Harold Landry's obviously, a guy that's had some really nice moments in the NFL. The Jerry Sneed, who was one of the best corners in the league. I loved McCreary coming out of college. Obviously, he has not been the same player, but they signed Quandre Diggs, Amani Hooker, like
Jamal Adams,
Chidobe Awuzie. Like, they draft Jarvis Brownlee, who I really like. They draft Devondre Sweat, who is an incredible player. We'll see if he's able to play 3 downs or stay healthy or whatever. On the offensive side of the football, like Hopkins, Boyd, and Ridley, it's a pretty formidable unit. Obviously, you would have liked that trio about 4 years ago,
yes.
More so than now. And, obviously Hopkins has the injury. We'll see with Ridley, second full year back. Does some of the drops go away? Does he look a little bit more like the player? I thought he had some nice moments last year. He also had a ton of drops and really struggled in the first half. The second half of the year got much better.
The Jacksonville's usage of him was bizarre. Like,
it was bizarre, and
you got to move him a little bit. He don't just line him up at X and say that's where you're going to be. I think you have to utilize him in different ways.
And Boyd's obviously a solid player. They obviously lose Derrick Henry. That's kind of the biggest thing is Tony Pollard's second year back. From the injury, does he look a little bit more like the player? We kind of all thought he was trending towards being offensive line wise. JC Latham unfortunately lifts off of practice today. We'll see the update there, but Latham, under Bill Callahan and. Obviously, you mentioned kind of bringing some of that Bengals, kind of offensive scheme there. Obviously, Boyd is familiar. They bring Cushenberry. I thought that was a nice signing. Skoronski in year 3, year 2. Like, there's a lot, or year 2, I apologize. But there's a lot there that on paper you say, like, all right, like game to game, you got a shot pretty much against anybody. The thing that, again, and I've said this about probably 5 of the 8 teams we've done so far, unfortunately, is like the Titans leaving, 2024. I think the expectation is probably 7 or 8 wins. It feels like, can you sneak to 9 in the playoffs if the AFC's weaker? Can you not fall at the bottom, fall out and be a 5-win team and everyone getting hurt and stuff like that? It comes down to Will Levis and, Mayo commercials aside and things. I thought Levis had some really nice moments last year. And I also thought he had some moments where, like, the reason he fell in the draft, it was like kind of the same crap. So the arm look is awesome. We know he's got a big arm. We know he's athletic. We know he's a big macho, tough guy. You got different types of quarterback.
Which endeared the hell out of him to his former coach and to that locker room. The locker room loves him. But to your point, is he good enough?
Is he good enough? And this is a division that is one of the most exciting quarterback divisions, I think, if not the most exciting going into 24 of Stroud year 2, Richardson year 2, Levis year 2, and then Trevor Lawrence, who just got paid, which we'll get to in a moment. But it's just an interesting division. And do I think the Titans are going to be bad? No. Do I think the Titans are going to lose a lot of games 23-16 or, 27-20 and things like that? They're probably a team that I think will be, again, in a lot of games, but we've already seen, injuries start to happen, with D-Hop and different things. Traylon Burks is obviously seems like I mean I'd be shocked if he's even on.
Yeah,
not moved at some point.
We're in the
very concerned
bust
category.
But yes, the close to bust category at this point.
Yeah, so the Titans are just a team that I think is very interesting, but they don't have one of the first round top 10 quarterbacks and types, so that's not really as much of the conversation. But I think they're going to be competitive. I just think that they're probably a year away, and my worry is a lot of the roster is instant fix, and it's just a weird timeline. It feels like, hey man, like Hopkins, Boyd, Ridley, Tony Pollard, Quandre Diggs, and Jamal Adams.
Yeah,
Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs, like 2022 season. You're like, whoa, man, like this team might win the division. Now it's like, hey man, can they win 8 games? So yeah, I'm not super high on the Titans. Again, not super low. I'm not expecting them to be a top 5 team picking in the draft again. Again, Levis looks good, and JC Latham looks awesome, and they get some, Devontae Sweat's, goes back to the player he was as an All-American 12 months ago. You're like, oh, all right. Like, I like where this team's headed. But there is a very real possibility JC Latham was the high floor, low ceiling guy. Levis kind of feels like a high ceiling, low floor guy as well. Like, there's a little concern for me of like this thing could be a potential disaster. But it might be better than expected. I'm just kind of indifferent on the Titans personally.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be real interested to follow this. Spent a lot of time with them in my previous lifetime at the NFL Network, and Vrabel obviously loomed over that entire organization, but did such a good job of making them incredibly competitive week in and week out, and built a sort of brand of the toughness of the kind of player that he wanted there.
Wow. JJ McCarthy is out for the 2024 season.
Well, there you go. So
I didn't mean to cut you off. That
no. So let me just say this quickly. I'll say this very quickly about Carthon, what they're building now. It seems like nothing like what they did with Vrabel, and I'm not really sure what the identity of the football team is supposed to be. They had a clear identity under Vrabel. Now it seems it's very scattershot. And when it comes to Levis, I spent a lot of time watching him because I kind of liked him coming out of college. And as I watched his stuff back from last year, you mentioned he had his moments, but like he in the pocket was kind of a disaster. He wanted to throw deep all the time, yet they didn't have the offensive line to protect him. A lot of short stuff, nothing in between. So it was deep or dump off, and that sort of middle of the field, that sort of 10 to 15 yard, 20 yard range, he didn't throw the ball there. And I don't know if that's how they designed it. I mean, I certainly saw, as I'm watching, I saw routes in those areas, whether they were the first or second reads, I don't know, but he didn't go there. And his pocket presence, which was a real concern coming out of Kentucky, I thought was awful. And I think it's why he took a lot of hits and took a lot of sacks. So that's, there's a lot riding on him. And look, the one thing you can say is, unlike some of these other teams, they decided we're going to give him a lot of offensive skill players. That's a pretty good receiver room, even if it's old receiver room, and see if he's got it. And maybe he doesn't, or maybe he does. And then you realize that's the guy we're going to build around for the next 5 to 10 years. But that's very interesting. Will, you love in the summertime. I know you love to go to Yankees games. So I'm not going to hold it against you. It's a nice park. The team I can live without, but whatever. You're that guy. Who do you use? Do you use anybody in particular when you need your tickets and you want to find that best seat? Maybe the day of, you're like, oh man, I got time. I'm going to go to a game tonight. It's beautiful out. Me and the girl, we're going to go to the game.
No, for me right now, it's Game Time app. It's incredibly easy to use, incredibly efficient. You find some of the best seats and some of the best deals, on the market for whether you're going to Yankees, Red Sox, or any type of sport.
Yeah, it's funny. My daughter keeps saying, when are we going to a game? When are we going to a game? I'm like, well, let me get the app. We put the app, we go, bam, we're done. It's so simple. It's so easy. The interface is just fantastic. You want to use that. GameTime.co. Last minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you need. Game Time's got it.
Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets this season with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
You want to jump in? We want quickly on the McCarthy thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mentioned it before, and we don't need to get too much more on it. This sucks. It's like uh, it's unfortunate. I think he had successful surgery. From all reports, he had full meniscus tear. I just, again, I want to just reiterate what I said earlier. I think the biggest thing for McCarthy this year was quarterback-friendly coach, quarterback-friendly offense, talent, etc. You always felt like Darnold would probably play the first 6 to 8, maybe 10 games this year, but McCarthy losing an entire year just stinks. I just think from a development perspective, now you're not even practicing. Like now this is like a full, you're just
it becomes a lost year. Yeah.
It's a lost year, and it's a guy who needed to develop. So it's a shame for the Vikings. It's a shame for him. I think the Vikings, and again, maybe I'm wrong here, but I think they were kind of all in on like, this is a bridge year. Can we either figure out McCarthy or, hey, do we find, our Geno Smith and Sam Darnold or whatever? Sure. Now it's all in on Sam, and, I hope he does well. Sam's probably my biggest miss ever in the draft. So it's just a shame for JJ. And I just, I was hoping maybe 4 to 6 weeks he's back, hey, practicing week 3. Now it's, unfortunate. And that's an injury that it's very popular. Obviously, it's not anything that we don't see, people see in their day-to-day lives too, but it's always a surgery, and you always worry just, how quickly does he come back, the confidence in the knee. So, shame for McCarthy and Vikings fans as a whole.
Yeah, it's a bummer because I definitely think at some point we were going to see him this year, if certainly not at the start, but definitely down the road. And, the idea of him building chemistry with Justin Jefferson, who's only 25, and Jordan Addison, who obviously had a terrific rookie year last year. It's unfortunate. And now you wonder for the Vikings, bridge year this year, maybe next year becomes a bridge year too, because you got to figure out if McCarthy can do this or not. All right, let's move on. As you say, we're a little indifferent about the Titans. I like I said, I am curious about what the hell the plan is there. The roster build is odd, but Jacksonville, I think you and I both feel like is the third best team in this division, and that's not a knock because they'll be in the mix for a playoff spot. They were 9-8 last year. They were 10th overall in DVOA, 10th on defense, 18th on offense, and I guess that's where I would start, Will. And the question I wrote for myself is, does this offense, not the quarterback, does this offense low-key suck? Okay? Doug Peterson got a ton of credit for coming in, being an adult in the room after the Urban Meyer thing, settling down. I mean, what was it? Just a complete wasted year for Trevor Lawrence. His rookie year was a complete disaster with Urban in charge, and did a nice job of sort of getting him on track. But as you watch this offense and the way he likes to play offense, and I feel like there are not a ton of answers in his offense. And for someone who was a quarterback for a long time in this league, and for someone who coached under guys like Andy Reid, he's from the Andy tree, right? I don't love the design of their offense. I don't love the makeup of their offense. And then when you think about what they did in the offseason, they drafted Brian Thomas in the first round. I like Brian Thomas. I think Brian Thomas has a chance to be a really good player for them. Long, fast, outside receiver, did great work with Jaden Daniels at LSU. They gave Gabe Davis a ton of money. Gabe Davis replaces Zay Jones, who they cut or trade, whatever. It doesn't matter. He's not there anymore. Gabe Davis has never really gone to that next place. And he was in an offense that was hoping that he would get to the next place in Buffalo, and playing with a guy, Josh Allen, who liked him a lot. And the Bills, they had some cap issues, obviously couldn't re-sign everybody, but they made absolutely zero effort to retain Gabe Davis's services. And then to shore up their offensive line, which has been a problem for Trevor Lawrence, the big signing is Mitch Morse. And Mitch Morse is a incredibly intelligent player. He's still got some juice left in the tank. He's not Mitch Morse all-pro, but, he could solidify things for them. But again, it's like, is that enough? I don't think that's enough for what they've done. And I just think, again, it'll all fall on Lawrence. They'll look at Lawrence. They just gave him the big extension, and people will say he sucks. I just don't think they have enough answers for him. And I don't think they do enough stuff to highlight his athleticism. I mean, I think he's a dynamic athlete, not Lamar Jackson dynamic, Kyler Murray dynamic, but he's a damn good athlete. Let him do some of that stuff. They haven't. And I think it's kind of showed. I think he's sort of, I don't want to say he's stagnated, but he's not become the guy that we thought he was going to be. And I guess my final point on that would be, it kind of feels eerily similar to what the Colts did with Andrew Luck. And when you think about it, Luck came out, best quarterback prospect since who knows what. And then when Lawrence came out 7-8 years later, what were we saying? Well, it's the
Andrew Luck.
best quarterback prospect since Luck. And Luck did a nice job of elevating the Colts, but never had enough around him, and certainly not enough in front of him. The offensive line was always a problem there. And he got hurt, and he got hurt again, and he got hurt again, and then said, I can't do this anymore, and stepped off the treadmill. Lawrence has been hurt quite a bit now. Last year really impacted him, multiple injuries. And I just wonder, like, are they doing enough? Like the Colts just didn't do enough. And then we're going to look back on this 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and say, how did they screw that up? How did they screw up Trevor Lawrence? Because he was too good to screw up.
Yeah, like the Jags are just a weird one where, like, I feel like last year everyone was expecting, again, this, we talked about this with Herbert, and I had this not weird theory, but if the Chargers win that game instead of blowing that big lead, are we talking about Trevor Lawrence in a very, oh man, the 4 picks and what a bad home playoff loss. You lost to the Chargers and the whole thing. And then we talk about the opposite. Oh, Trevor won a playoff game and they almost beat Mahomes when he had, on the ankle and the whole thing. And it's like, yeah, they lost 24-17. It was 24-10 most of the game. They couldn't beat an unhealthy Mahomes. They paid Josh Allen. Josh Allen, I apologize. And, he's awesome. He's turned into even better probably than the player anyone could have expected. They trade for Eric Armstead, who I think is a good player. I think the name carries a little bit more weight than the numbers and production may suggest. But he's obviously still a very good player. Give him a bunch of money. Aloy Afuokan is awesome. The defense should be pretty good. I think the defense is in a pretty good spot where I don't know if they're a top 5 or top 10 unit, but they're at least league average, if not a little bit better. Offensively, Sheriff was a big signing a couple years ago. Missed Morris. They gave Ezra Cleveland a bunch of money.
And he was second half of last year. Cleveland,
he was bad. He was bad. It was worth the gamble. But.
Well, actually, just to interject, their offensive line right now, as constructed, guys are either being paid top 15 money at the position, or were drafted in the first round. Like that's the investment that they have in there. But it feels like
they haven't necessarily got the right guys.
Misevaluation, misallocation of funds, whatever you want to say, that, yeah, they haven't gotten the right guys.
Yeah, and then at the receiver spot, you mentioned it. Brian Thomas, I liked a lot. I haven't seen a single tweet or a single thing about Brian Thomas the entire summer. Like, I don't. Again,
there are only like 3 people that cover the Jaguars.
Yeah, so it's a little.
God
tough,
love them. I love them all, but
yeah.
like it's a small market.
It's a small market. It's just been a little bit weird. I just haven't seen too much, Brian Thomas hype, which usually these guys get hyped up, one way or another when they're rookies. So it'd be interesting to see if they get in games. They have some nice fringe guys, right? Gabe Davis is a wide receiver 2.5, 3. You'd feel better about than as it's a true 2. Christian Kirk, same thing. Evan Ingram, obviously, and Travis Etienne, like both good players, and I think in different respects have been good players. I just think this team just like screams middle of the pack. I just think they're like an 8 or 9, or Lawrence is awesome next year. They're a 10-win team. Lawrence is fine and a good player. They're probably an 8 or 9 win team. And like Doug P's a good coach. I don't think he's like the best coach in the league. I think he's not by no means anywhere near the bottom. He's good. He is who he is. He kind of seems like when he gets to places, they have a really big jump early on, and then it starts to fade a bit. It's obviously now 2 spots where you've kind of seen a similar thing, a little different. Obviously, the Jags didn't win the title, but kind of get out of favor quickly in Philly there. And like I said, they just scream like they're good. They're fine. Like they're a team that could beat anybody and frankly lose to anybody. And we saw that last year. So yeah, I think the Titans are pushing to get to that Jags 3rd spot. And I feel like there's a lot more with Indy and Houston than there is with Jacksonville. We could see this leap from Trevor Lawrence this year. He stays healthy. They get really good production. They get the good Gabe Davis and they might have lost Calvin Ridley, but Brian Thomas steps in and, hey, this different dynamism, and defense is a top 10 unit, and Doug P figures it out and they win 10 or 11 games. I just lean towards like they're kind of feel like a 500 team, a little above 500. And they're one of those teams that for all the hype 12 months ago, it's now all with the Texans, and kind of feel like people are just forgetting about the Jags. Whether they'll be right or wrong, we'll see. But I feel like they just feel 8 or 9 wins. I don't. Again, that's kind of where I'm landing with them. I keep coming back to see that ceiling, being as high as maybe others do.
Yeah, I'm a little lower on Peterson as a coach than you, and not that you're touting him as something great. I wonder if this year and being that sort of tread water 8-9, 9-8 team, if they don't look at it and say, okay, thank you, we appreciate you taking us out of the dark days of Urban Meyer, but now we got to go find somebody who maybe aligns a little bit more with what Trevor is about, what we think Trevor can be about, and that's what the decision they make and move on. Now we go to the interesting part of this, because there's a team we're about to talk about right now that is getting a ton of buzz nationally. And I got to tell you, initially, Will, I was a little bit on it. I was like, I could get on that train. And the more I've dug into it, I'm not going there, but I think you are. That's the Indianapolis Colts. Quickly last year, 9-8, with Gardner Minshew essentially playing quarterback for a better part of the season. 20th in DVOA, 13th offensively, 20th defensively. And to me, and this is sort of a similar conversation we had about a lot of these teams, the quarterback. Do you, Will Parkinson, believe in Anthony Richardson, who is getting a ton of love? We haven't really seen very much of Anthony Richardson as an NFL quarterback, and he's entering year 2.
Yeah, the Colts, I'm really struggling with this division on whether I go Colts or Texans. I felt like I wanted to go Colts for a while because I felt like last year Shane Steichen really impressed me. Like I felt really good, and I felt like
100%.
Even more impressive to me was how bad Philly became without Shane Steichen, and how much Jalen Hurts, injured or not, did not look like the same player. Sirianni didn't look like the same coach. Even the production outside of guys other than A.J. Brown was not the same. It was like even the offensive line, I know they lost some pieces or got older, et cetera. Like even they didn't look as good. So I was like, damn, like Shane Steichen really must have been
that guy. Yeah.
Is he that guy? And then you look and like they were really spunky last year. Obviously got some great, a great year out of Zaire Franklin and these guys, and DeForest Buckner's still there. The defense isn't great, to be honest. Like I feel like they're kind of a by committee group. They're good at linebacker. The spine of that defense is good. Outside, I don't feel particularly awesome. I mean, Kenny Moore is a great player, like there's no doubt, and things like that. The reason I think to be high on the Colts is with Gardner Minshew, with all the quarterback issues, and a division last year that was good, they should very much have beaten that Texans team. Like, well, they're one drop away, and the offensive line returned to being really good. And it was like, hey, Quinn Nelson had that 1 year where it was like, he's not good anymore. Yeah, and then he's awesome again. And you just look at that group and you feel really good. And Jonathan Taylor last year, the holdout, and he wasn't the same player. Like you expect him to be much more of the Jonathan Taylor from 2 years ago. I think Pittman's awesome. Alec Pierce feels like he's going to take a step. A.D. Mitchell is a really interesting one. I think this team, if they win the division, we'll be talking about, wow, Richardson made that leap, and he, or he just played, frankly, because he missed pretty much all of last year. And I don't, Joe Flacco maybe has some juice. Who knows if he misses a game or two? But I think the athleticism of Richardson is what excites you. Can he be like, he's all the running and the big arm and all this stuff. And, Pittman's obviously a great possession receiver. A.D. Mitchell is as polarizing as a receiver prospect. I talked to some people around the Colts around draft time, and they took A.D. Mitchell, and they were like, we couldn't believe we got him. Like we wanted this guy. This guy fits what we have. Him, Pierce, and Pittman should be this great trio. And then you talk to other teams, and they're like, wouldn't have taken that dude in the 7th round, let alone in the 1st round. So it's just an interesting one. I just think that it's very easy to take the Colts as the division winners and say, hey, Houston overachieved last year. Indy's going to get this bump from Richardson, and they have a great coach and all this different stuff. But then you really look deeper in it, and you're like, they might really be the second team. So I'm now going to change on the fly here. The more I talk through the Colts, the more I get concerned. But on the face of it, I want them, and I think they're going to be good. I just don't know how good they're going to be, and it feels like maybe they're a wild card team more so than a division winner.
I mean, just with Richardson, and again, I think when you saw him last year in the preseason, and then the limited time we got to see him in the regular season, the thing that plagued him and concerned people at the University of Florida was sort of the scattershot accuracy, and the accuracy looked a lot better in the pro game. That said, he threw for 144 yards per game before he got hurt. Again, didn't play. The sample size is very small. 36 yards on average running the football. He doesn't scramble to run, which I give him credit for. I think a lot of those guys that are those sort of freak athletes, like the easy thing to do would just be to like, I'm not going to wait this out. I'm just going to put it under my arm, and I'm a better athlete than 95% of the guys on the field, and I'm just going to go make people miss. Obviously, the problem with that is you're the most important guy on the field, and we can't expose you to getting too many hits because it does add up. I will say the shoulder injury was kind of freaky last year. That cost him ended up costing him the season. Even the concussion, he tried to tuck, duck, and roll in the end zone, and he hit his head on the turf in the tuck, tuck, and roll, like trying to protect himself. And it unfortunate, right? But he's got to take a massive leap. Mitchell is sort of the X factor in here because obviously with the arm and the skill set that Richardson possesses, they were hoping Pierce was going to be the explosive outside guy. That hasn't happened yet. Mitchell brings a certain different element, a little bit more pure speed there, but is obviously still a big guy, big target. If they can somehow incorporate that in their game, that'll loosen things up for Pittman underneath. And I mean, that's where he does his work. But give him maybe a little bit more room or maybe a little bit more space in there to the run after catch. A lot of times he's catching the ball and he's going down because they're just two guys hawking him. Well, he might be in situations where if they can get someone on the outside playing better, that loosens things up for him and gives him a little bit more run because I think he's a better athlete. Look, he got paid. He got paid for a reason. He's a good player, but I think there might be another level for him. And the last thing I wanted to mention about these guys is, for as good as Steichen is, I have never been a fan of Gus Bradley's defenses.
Yeah.
They are the classic, we do what we do. And there is they never really bottom out. Like I think they did when he was in Jacksonville, but he wasn't cut out to be a head coach. But just in terms of as a coordinator, like there's a certain level of quality of play you get from his teams, but I never feel like they go to the next place. And then when you look at, I think their secondary is a little bit weak, especially at corner. What did they do? They didn't add anybody. They're just kind of rolling with what they had. They were interested in Snead. They didn't pull the trigger on that deal because Chris Ballard doesn't tend to like to make these sort of big deals. He's a big draft and develop guy. And he feels to me like he's skated a little bit here, maybe with some of his approach to building this thing. And then Samson Ekubom, who had 9.5 sacks last year, blew out his Achilles right at the start of camp.
Yep.
So that's a big loss. I mean, he was a good player for them last year. Kwity Paye has been on the up and up. They drafted Latu in the first round from UCLA. By all accounts, he's looked very good.
Yeah, I was going to say, everything you hear is he's been a demon during camp.
Just the big problem there is the medicals, right? It's the reason why based on his tape, he's a top 10 player. Like just his production, his overall tape, as polished a pass rusher. Not even as like he was by far and away the most polished pass rusher, the best one in this draft. But the injuries led some teams to pull him off the board completely. They roll the dice on this. If it hits, it's great because he's certainly a good player. I just wonder how long can he be a good player for this team? And so they might have some bodies to fill that spot, but I wonder about the overall construction of their team. And I fear the team that it's maybe from covering this for a million years, when the hype train gets rolling like this for a team before the season starts, I have this tendency to be like, I don't know. I don't know. It feels like we've decided that we're going to be the smart people, and this is the team we're going to pick to be better than you think. And then when we get into it, you're like, the flaws that we knew they had that we decided to overlook because of the potential of this player, that player, this thing, that thing, they usually come to fruition. So,
See, I feel I agree with you, but I feel like I agree in a sense because I feel like this with the Texans and the Colts. And I think for different reasons. I think the Colts, as I mentioned, like I contemplated, I might pick them for the division, right? I think that's probably maybe a step too far. Maybe I'll end up being right in the end. But the Texans are a team where I feel like we've jumped to, they're right behind Kansas City. They're neck and neck with Kansas City. They're already better than, Buffalo and Miami and the Jets. And they're definitely better than the Bengals and the Ravens and the Steelers. Like, I'm not there with the Texans. I think they're the class of the division. I think it'd be a big-time disappointment if they didn't win the division. I think that Stroud in 2023 was awesome. I think he was awesome based on the expectations because I think, again, there was the second pick. There was the, stupid, Wonderlic test stuff and all that those different types of things. they did beat Joe Flacco and the Browns at home in the playoffs by a lot, and then kind of got steamrolled by the Ravens. It was closer than it really probably was, and they overachieved. But I don't know. I watched the Texans in person last year with a couple injuries after Tank Dell went down, and like CJ Stroud threw for 80 yards, and they got steamrolled by Zach Wilson really badly. And so I just worry a little bit with the Texans. Are we jumped a little too far into like they're one of the contenders in the AFC? I expect them to probably be likely the 3 seed, if not the 4 seed in the AFC. Like, I think they're going to be a good team. And I think they have potential if Stroud takes that true, I'm a legit top 5 guy. And like, this is not just a 10-game, 12-game stretch. Like, I'm awesome. And Diggs is at least some of what he's been the last 5 years. And Tank Dell stays healthy and Tunsil stays the same. And, you know, all those different things. And D'Amico's defense is as good as it's supposed to be. And Will Anderson, second-year jump. And Danielle Hunter, like, on paper, this team is awesome. Like, there is no question. And I'm not debating that they're not going to be, like, they're going to be a playoff team and they're going to be really damn good. I just, are they like everyone's sexy Buffalo Bills 2021 pick? Like, see, they're already better than Kansas City. And it's like, how did you jump?
Right. How did you get there? I think it's, I think
off a little.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. And it's different when no one expects anything of you and no one expected anything of Houston. The preseason, Stroud wasn't great in the preseason. In fact, I saw him that first week and you're like, ooh, he's got a ways to go. Well, it turned out he had one of the best rookie seasons a quarterback's had in some time. You know, people mentioned in the same breath with Dan Marino, who threw like 48 touchdown passes back in the day, which is still outrageous for a league that wasn't as advanced throwing the football then as they are now by far. But now they're going to be a team that everybody circles. And now guys are going to put a little extra into CJ Stroud and Nico Collins. These are the guys. Well, I'm the guy. So, you know, like I need to have my best game today to prove to you. I'm going to be on there. You know, now all of a sudden they're a national TV team. They weren't that last year, right? They're getting big time spotlight shown on them and they're going to get, you just get that little extra. I mean, all those years, and you know it, like in the league, Patriots, all those years, like that Patriots game you play, it doesn't matter who you're playing. Like when the Jets stunk, that's a big game for the Jets. You know, like, oh, you know, we can be Brady. If we can be Brady, you know, like is the program turning in the right direction? Oh, if I pick off Brady, if I lock up Julian Edelman, Wes Welker, Randy Moss, like, what does that do for me? You know, like, how do people start viewing me as a player? So I think they're going to get a lot of that, and it'll challenge DeMeco Ryans. And I think he's a really bright guy. I think you saw that last year. I think he's obviously, from all accounts, a terrific leader. And Nick Caserio willing to bet on his leadership, trading for Diggs, who, despite being incredibly targeted over the last 2 years, was constantly unhappy. And then they sort of did phase him out late last season in terms of the offense, but willing to bring him in here, rip up the deal, 1 year, make good. So Diggs is going to want his touches. Nico Collins may be the number one. Tank Dell actually may be their best receiver. Tank was freaking awesome. And I think he's a terrific player. Just same thing. He's going to have to stay healthy. He's not the biggest guy. So what's going to happen then when Diggs has a game where he's not targeted? He always talks about the idea of like, oh, I just want to win. Well, you're probably going to win some games there where you're not even remotely a part of the offense. You know, you're an afterthought. I think if you watch tape of the Bills last year, he still gets open. He still got that game. He just doesn't do it all the time. And is that an attitude thing? Or is that like, hey, my body is starting to break down a little bit and I need to conserve my energy. And I know I'm not getting the ball in this play. So you're not getting it. Like, I'm not giving you the effort. And then that leads to like, dude, you got to throw a block there. You got to, we need to clear this out for the tight end. Whatever. I'm not getting the ball. What do I care? So he'll be challenged, I think, in that regard. And I think CJ will be challenged too. Like, everybody points to him as the guy and the leader. He's also still the young guy, you know? So, okay, kid, you've done it for 12 games. Your resume isn't as long as mine. And I suspect Joe Mixon, another guy, like Joe Mixon can be a little salty. They traded for him and then they gave him a contract, which I don't quite get the contract thing. I think Nick might have.
Yeah, I did understand that.
Just, hey, come here. We'll take care of you this year. We'll give you a bump this year and then go out and earn it. No, they gave him some more money. So same thing. Maybe that security makes him a happier guy, but he's also been a little bit of a volatile character over the course of his career. So I think
I want to hit on Stingley quickly. I don't know
yeah,
if you want
shoot.
to go there.
No, go there. I was going to.
We talk a lot about Sauce, and rightfully so. I think
Yep.
Sauce has objectively been better, but Stingley's a guy who teams loved. Obviously, again, probably the best freshman season we've ever seen from a corner, and he obviously fell apart from injuries. And I just feel like with Stingley, took a big step last, coming out of the draft. Like, this defense should be at worst just really just good, and like Stingley's a guy who can make that all-pro level leap. So I think he was quietly really awesome last year, and I'm curious to see what that looks like again in year 3. I just, as you mentioned, like, it sounds like I was kind of hating on them a little bit. I want to see a little bit more before I think they're in that Kansas City.
Yeah, they were 10-7 last year, wasn't they? They weren't 13-4. Like the Bills took out a good leap that year when people started to be like, "Oh, this is the year." Well, no, to your point, you still got to beat the big dogs, and they hadn't beaten the big dogs in the big moment. The Texans are going to have to do that.
Slowick, like, is Slowick a head coach next year? Like, one more year, he probably is. If they regress, he's probably not. I don't know. You're playing first place.
By the way, quickly on him, he did not have his playoff performance as a play caller was poor. So just something to kind of like throw into the mix. Like, Baltimore exposed him a little bit. Now, what's his counter to what they did? Because other teams will copycat that.
Yeah, I feel like kind of just wrapping this division up. Like, I feel like Houston is going to win the division, probably 11-win team. Maybe they get to 12 if Stroud really takes that leap, probably more in that 11 category. I think they've gotten better for sure. But again, first place schedule versus fourth place, very different prime time, as you mentioned. I think the Colts are a borderline playoff team. I think they need Richardson to be healthy. I think they need some other guys to stay healthy and take some jumps. They need something out of A.D. Mitchell, these different things. But they could be a wild card team, a spunky team in the AFC. I think Jacksonville misses. I think they're probably around 500, 8-9, 9-8 type of team. And I think Tennessee's probably around a 6-win team again. It's all just, this division comes down to 4 quarterbacks who are all 25 and under. Houston probably feels the best right now. But maybe in 6 months we think Indy feels the best, or we think Jacksonville feels the best again. Maybe it's Tennessee. But there's a lot of young coaches, a lot of young quarterbacks. It's a competitive division. I just think Houston's the class of this, and it's going to be probably Indy and Jacksonville fighting for 2, and Tennessee kind of picking up the rear there at number 4, unfortunately. Yeah,
Tennessee has the potential, as you mentioned. Like, I don't think they should. Well, look, if Brian Callahan can't coach and they have some disastrous injuries, anything's possible. But like, I don't think they're going to be a disaster. The roster construction is so odd to me. And I think they're going to run into that. They're already, as you mentioned, they're already running into it with the Hopkins injury, 4 to 6 weeks with the knee. And it just, okay, you got some older guys. This is kind of what happens to these guys at that point with a lot of miles on their body. All right, that's going to wrap it up, I think, for this one. We'll be back on Friday after some more preseason games. We'll get, hopefully, me personally, as I'll be at Foxboro for Patriots and Eagles, I'll get more to write about than just 6 Drake Maye snaps. They're promising more snaps. Knowing then, that means he's going to get 2 series and 12 snaps. So, who knows? But certainly for Patriot fans who follow this process, it'd be nice to see a little juice from the quarterback, because he's looked a little lost and a little behind the 8 ball here, especially this last week. It'd be nice to get some positivity out of that, just so you don't feel like we might not see.
Yeah, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I mean, look, the conversation's come up quite a bit this week about the idea that, like, forget about the notion of him playing halfway through the year or in December. You might see him not play a real game until 2025, and that's
not what you want.
No, you want to. I mean, I still am a believer in getting the guy some real life experience and understanding speed, scheme, the whole thing. But it feels like they are treading very carefully with their young quarterback. And look, I understand some of the guys that were here last year, the last couple, saw what happened to Mac Jones and say we don't want to do the same thing to our guy. But this guy has a lot more physical talent than that kid ever did. In Mac Jones. So that is going to do it for the All 32 pod. As always, please, well, first of all, thank you for listening, watching. consuming this however you are. Like, subscribe, and reviews. We feed off the reviews. Give us some reviews. Bumps us more into circulation. It's a whole thing. It's a whole process. Will knows it as the pod master with 900 pods that he does. But we're joining us, and we'll be back at it again on Friday.